Hi, shalom friends. When you look at our prayers, the words are beautiful, very, very moving, and very meaningful. But prayers have a strange way of affecting you. At times, the words resonate. At times, you just say the words. And sometimes the words make you think. And there's one passage that just recently began to bother me. We say, Elokeinu v'Elokei Aviseinu, our God, the God of our forefathers. And I'm wondering, why do we have to mention our forefathers? He is our God. Not only that, but actually 3 times a day, we say as follows, blessed are you, Almighty God, the God of our forefathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we're already reaffirming that our God is the God that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob worshipped, and we're his children. So why do we have to again preface it by our God, the God of our fathers? Well, I was bothered by this until I read a story about the Bluzhever Rebbe, Rabbi Israel Spira. He was a very prominent rabbinic personality and a Hasidic leader. And when I read that story, it sort of helped me come to terms with what does this mean, at least in terms of my own personal personal message. Rabbi Israel tells the story that during those horrible years of darkness, which loosely we call the Holocaust, he was in a work camp, Janowska Road camp, and this was in southeast Poland. And even amongst the work camps, which were all run by very efficient and cruel, heartless individuals, the ones that were in charge of this were actually very high on the level of cruel. I know it's hard to imagine when a person has a heart of stone, how it could be even harder. But yes, he was in that work camp. And there were tens of thousands of Jews that were worked to death and were humiliated and murdered in every possible conceivable way. The rabbi had a strong will to live, coupled with a strong faith in God. And every single day he would go out, he was 54 years old at this time, and go out and work and do the most impossible feats that he never would have imagined in his wildest dreams, that he would be picking up the rocks and making craters and lifting all kinds of heavy things, which were way beyond any healthy 50-year-old, certainly not someone who was not trained for this. During the weeks that he was in this camp, there was a free thinker, a non-believer, who came, I believe, was from Warsaw, and he was very intrigued by the Rabbi Israel. And a strong friendship broke out between them. So in between the times of working, when they had to walk to the work camp, walk back, they would often discuss things of theology. Rabbi, how can you believe when we're in this situation? Where is our God? And he would respond, and a very, very strong friendship and a kinship arose between them. One horrible night, they were very rudely awakened, and they were given literally 2-3 minutes to leave the barracks. Schnell, schnell, raus, raus. And anyone, they were told, anyone that will stay in the barracks will be shot immediately. Well, this was not an idle threat, and within minutes they all stood at attention. And the fiend, who was their commander, said, we're going to have some fun tonight. I'm going to march you to the craters, which are right outside the camp. Actually, these craters were created during World War I. They had never been filled. Over 30 years had passed since the war was over, and they were just empty. And we're going to see if you're worth keeping alive. Those that are strong enough to jump over the crater will live. Those that are not strong enough and land up in the crater will be shot. And he began to imitate the sound of a machine gun and laughed. The thousands realized that for the vast majority of them, they would never be returning. And because even to be an Olympic champion, it would have been something to run and jump over this pit. But not when you're emaciated and you're starving and you're without malnourished and so on. So as they're walking, the free thinker says to the Bluzhever Rebbe, he says, Spira, you know what, when we get to the pit, let's just sit down. Why should we be a source of amusement for these horrible individuals? They'll shoot us and we'll die, rather than making the attempt to jump and we're going to die anyway. And Rabbi Israel turns to his friend and he says, everything is the will of God. If God wanted the pits to be dug, they were dug. If he wants us to jump, we will jump. And if he wants us not to make it, we won't make it. But it is not our job is to do what we can. And they're following one after another. They could hear the constant sounds of the machine gun. Most people did not make it and were being shot in this pit. It's pitch dark. They come to the pit. His friend is right next to him, and Rabbi Israel closes his eyes and he whispers, I am jumping, we are jumping. And he flexes whatever muscles he has and he jumps. Probably it could not have been more than a couple of seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. He lands, opens up his eyes, and he's on the other side of the pit. Right next to him is this free thinker who's hysterical. He's crying and laughing, and he says, Rabbi Spira, we did it, we did it, we did it. There is a God in Israel. I see there is a God in Israel. It was a miracle. And Rabbi Yisrael is quiet. And the free thinker looks at Rabbi Yisrael and he says, but Rabbi, how did you do it? And he says, I don't know. I closed my eyes and I imagined my father. And I imagined holding on to my father's coat. And my father was holding on to his father's coat. And his father's coat was being held by his grandfather. And somehow my holy forebearers, all of them were holy tzaddikim, they schlepped me over the pit. But then, as if coming to himself, he looks at the free thinker and he says, my friend, how did you do this? And he said, Rabbi, I held on to your coat. And this is a true story. He actually said it to Yafa Erlich. It's printed in Hasidic Stories of the Holocaust, and it came from an interview. But that's what I was thinking about. You know, there is my God. What do I know about my God? I know he's very good, he's very kind, he's everything. There's no place where he is not. And in all of my experiences, I have been privileged through no merit of my own, just through divine kindness, to see and to feel God's closeness and God's kindness to me. Heaven forbid, and I pray every day, I should never be brought to a test. What happens if I don't meet that God anymore? What happens if, heaven forbid, there's an illusion and it seems like that we're not on speaking relationships? Perhaps he has turned his back on me. Then I say to myself, you know, there's the God of my father. My father didn't always have all of the gifts that I have, but he had a firm belief. And then we take a look at my father's father, and we say, how did he see his God? And he experienced his God, the true God, the only God, the one God, in a completely different form. So when I now address the Almighty, I say, Eloheinu, you are my God, but it's much more than the way I see and feel you. It is the God of my fathers. When we think about the Jewish people, over thousands of years of not only of living Jewishly, but being persecuted, being hounded, and under every circumstance, being loyal, that faith becomes so real, so true, so strong, that it could stand up to anything. So indeed, when I pray, it's my God, and then I also latch onto and I absorb the God of my father and my fathers all the way back to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This awesome truth that each and every one of us is connected to, not only our personal understanding and relationship to the Almighty, but through the relationship and the depth of feeling that our fathers and grandfathers all the way back to the patriarchs had. This is what keeps us strong, and this is what gives us our strength to continue. Let's hope and pray that we will use the faith to do good things and to experience only revealed blessings. Amen.